Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 27th year of talking to writers and other artists, I interview that kind of creative person for a half hour every week. It's a pretty wide net. We don't talk only to writers, despite the name of the show. We have other other artists on as well. We have had on sculptors, we've had on painters, we've had on actors, all sorts of people. If you have an idea for someone who might be good as a guest for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be very glad to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming that comes out of this TV studio is a product of Cable Access Television. It's a wonderful community service, and you don't get it if you subscribe to Dish. So don't pay attention to those ads on television. Stick with cable. I'm very happy to say tonight we do have an artist on, a visual artist, and her name is Stephanie Cole. She's originally from Hartford, although she has lived in upstate New York in Ithaca, but is a longtime resident of Rockport. She moved here with her husband Jim for a time in '67 and then permanently in '71, and has been in Rockport producing art and running an antique shop ever since. I'm going to read a brief paragraph from her biography about her training. She spent 3 years at the California College of Arts and Crafts and finished her fine arts degree at Hartford Art School, which is part of the University of Hartford. She had a double major there, a BFA in painting and a degree in art education. She also took some postgraduate courses. I want to welcome then Stephanie Cole, all the way from Hartford via Ithaca to the Writer's Block.
Thank you, John. It's lovely to be here. And because I have to think very seriously about my work, would you mind if I read a brief statement about what it is?
I would like it very much if you would read that statement.
Thank you. How do I explain? I make things out of stuff. I prefer stuff with a history. Family history is the best, but others will do. Junk, reused, old and precious, memorabilia, that's what I like. My pieces have stories. Words are my second language, so I use the visual to work out an event, an emotion, or just a reaction to a material. My training earned me a fine arts degree in painting. As it turned out, over time, two-dimensional painting was not enough. I have worked in wood, paper, found objects, cloth, beads, glass, things found in nature, and most recently, mosaic. I am not involved commercially and have kept my work to myself. At this point, what I have made has come together in my finally realized studio space, and I call it the Secular Cathedral.
Thank you very much for that statement and sharing that with us. I want to ask you a question that occurred to me when I looked at your bio notes.
Yes.
What moved you from painting purely to the kind of work you do now with stuff?
My father was a painter. When you study art, you are always involved in drawing, usually in painting. I found watercolor to be my media of choice, and I brought a watercolor with me. It's down here in front of the desk.
Okay. Stephanie has brought several pieces here, and I'm delighted that we can talk about them. We'll show first the one that's in front of the desk, below my hand. If we can show that, wonderful.
This one,
you described that for us, Stephanie.
Yes, the title is Nostalgia Group, and the reason I brought it was part of a one-woman show of watercolors that I had. So I seem to be on a track to be a watercolorist, but in this painting, it's sort of telling me what I love to use, which is memorabilia. Antique things, old things. There's a puppet in there that my older daughter Irene made when she was in grade school. There are photographs of ancestors. And this was part of the clue. I found myself relating to objects, and I liked stories that they told me. And I've always liked to build things. I did as a child, and I started to make things instead of painting, although I consider that whatever I'm using, I'm painting with that. So instead...
So could we go back to that for just a second? Now, this is very interesting to me. These are objects, but they're in watercolor.
Yes.
So this is a dual layer form, really.
Yes.
The stuff and the watercolor. And I think you've
Yes.
said that watercolor is more difficult than oil.
Yes, I believe that's true.
So what led to the choice there of not putting the objects up, but a watercolor image of the objects?
Well, I just assembled things that interested me. It was doing a still life, but not of typical objects. They were things that I related to because of family or just their charm.
I'm especially curious. I love watercolor. I just love watercolor.
I do too.
And so I was really curious about that, the two layers there.
Not only the watercolor, but I think people who are watercolorists are interested in the use of light. Light has to come through. White is the white of the paper. I did not use gouache. And as you'll find out when we talk about it further, I have done windows using glass, and that's the use of light also. Sargent and Lafarge, they were both excellent watercolorists, and Lafarge made glass windows. Some of my favorites are by him. And when I refer to the secular cathedral, I get a lot of my joy from seeing glass windows in cathedrals.
Yes, as I mentioned before the show, we've had experts on glass from cathedrals on the show.
Yeah,
and it's spectacular.
My experience with the glass was that when our children were taking swimming lessons, we would go down to Front Beach, and while they were on the sand kicking and learning to do strokes, I was digging out in the water. I'd go waist deep and find the big pieces, and because that's where the pirates used to come in, I would find some pretty spectacular pieces. And they just were being collected, and I thought, I'm going to learn how to make a window out of them. So that's how it started.
Now, you've bought some other pieces as well
Yes.
that are flanking us.
Yes.
And I think in a second we're going to go to the piece on my right.
On your right.
On Connor's left. And if you could, when we get that in focus, this I describe this, which is titled
Cake.
Cake.
This.
There we are.
This is actually a map. It's a drawing that when I finish a large project, I sometimes like to document it by doing a drawing. And in this case, this is a mosaic, fully three-dimensional, and it was honoring Jim's, my husband's, and my 50th wedding anniversary. And I thought, well, our ceremony was so small and undramatic for our 50th, I'm going to make a cake. But the cake is totally made out of mosaic. And the map describes a lot of what's going on. All of the description in the writing that you see on one side is telling what's going on in the mosaic. And I brought you a slice of the cake because the cake itself is way too big to bring. This, if you can point up to each layer of the cake, represents a decade in our life. So the bottom is the first 10 years and so on. So if you go up to the fourth decade,
These
yes, go up to the fourth decade, there's the slice that came out.
right here.
Yes, and each layer has a slice, and then within the slice you'll see photographs, and the photographs are self-evident. It shows us at that period of life. And on the front of that slice, it shows two little babies. Those are the grandchildren. That was in the fourth decade that we had the grandchildren.
There's one slice from each layer.
Yes. And I couldn't bring the cake.
Where does the cake reside? Where does the cake reside?
All of these pieces are in my studio, and they're all pretty big.
And they're not for sale
No.
because you're not commercial.
I'm not commercial, but I would like to be known at this point because I have done so much that it's getting very difficult to move around in there. And what I'm hoping is that I would have a museum show something that would show everything together. And at that point, if someone wanted to represent me and put them up for sale, then I could sell it.
What led to the decision that you did not want to sell up to this point?
I had done some pieces, and as soon as a commercial enterprise was interested, they wanted me to do only that. They said, I brought a quilt to the Alianza Gallery in Boston. And as soon as I did that, she said, well, we're going to put that right in our front window, but people are going to want to know what you're working on next. And it had to be a quilt. It's other forces getting involved in the process, and I didn't want that to happen.
Is the flip side of that your work cannot spread out physically so that people see it and know it in New York or Hartford or Chicago or LA?
I would like that to happen now, but first I had to see what my process, where it was going to bring me. I wanted to let the whole vision come out.
So a general future plan is to do a show and see if there's purchasing interest.
Yes,
And that would come from your whole oeuvre, so they wouldn't come back and say, "Oh, we want more of this.
That's
We want
right.
more cakes."
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Are there prospects for that on the horizon right now?
No,
This
you're
show-
outing me, John.
This show will put you over
Oh,
into the museum world,
yes.
no doubt.
May I explain a couple more pieces for you?
I would like you to go to the painting on your left.
Oh, yes.
Next.
All right. This is another large piece, and this is called The Ironic Trinity.
Would you say that name again, please?
The Ironic Trinity, and the reason it's called that is because they started with 3 antique ironing boards. You can see the shape. It's also that Gothic shape because of the secular cathedral. And when I found my first one, it was an antique, and it had that beautiful Gothic arch, and I thought, I'm just going to buy it. I don't know what I'm going to use it for. One of my main concerns that appears in my art quite often is my concern for nature and the environment. And the Ironic Trinity, there's a joke there. I feel that ironing is one of the greatest wastes of time, and I gave it up a long time ago. Unless I need to iron something for art, I will do that, but not clothing.
I agree with you completely. Absolutely, completely.
So what this represents is greed, which is pretty big. This is 6.5 feet tall. This is waste, and I collected the most interesting waste from our household for a year. I also picked up anything that was on the street that was interesting. So we have greed, waste, and this is nature. It's the smallest one because I feel like nature's losing the battle. And everything in this piece is a natural material, including some of my hair and a wasp's nest and pine needles and all sorts of things, but totally natural. So there's serious meaning and a pun.
I want to go back, we don't have to show them all, but I want to ask when the watercolor was finished.
That was done in 1979, and I had my one-woman show in 1980.
And where was that show?
That was on the Salem State campus in the Win-Fiske Gallery.
How long did that piece take you, if you recall?
I don't recall.
And over here on my right, the cake
The cake.
that we spoke about
Yes.
a few minutes ago. When was the date of completion for that?
Well, let's see. Our 50th anniversary would have been in
You
2013.
better remember, because Jim's here.
Yeah. 2013, right. And it took me a while to do that, but, I had it in my head to honor it.
It's a lot of construction.
Yes, doing anything on the round like that is difficult. And the first thing I had to do was find some of the shapes and create the underlayment because it had to hold mosaic. So there had to be central posts to support everything. I didn't want it to collapse.
And this involves a lot of delicate carpentry.
Yes, I use the bandsaw a lot. And when I'm not capable, my husband is an excellent woodsmith, and he'll help me out.
I take it no matter how successful your museum show is, the cake will not be for sale.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
And now the piece behind you,
Yes.
over on your left,
Yes.
when was that completed? And
Oh, I don't know. I'm chronologically challenged. But I did bring you something that's an actual piece. It's kind of a follow-up to that.
sure.
Because I found a small ironing board. So here's a small antique ironing board, and it relates to,
Yeah, leave it, point it to Cameron over here.
it's all done in mosaic. There again, here's a pun in my title. And it refers to the state of the world. It begins with the primordial ooze at the bottom, comes up where things begin to emerge out of the water, goes into nature in a pure form, and it gets to be more garden-like, and then people enter in here and have their influence, and then you have things like the industrial era, and it starts to get a little bit drastic as it goes up. And there are words in there, and there are images, and it really requires someone to study it.
Many images, many pictures, some photographs, some little animals.
It's our treatment of animals and animals on the earth,
And many of these objects are raised, so you've got the nice three-dimensional effect.
Yes.
Especially up on top where it's more
Yes, yes.
explosive.
yes. So I couldn't bring the big ones, but I brought the little one.
Now, you have also brought, or sent earlier in preparation
Yes.
for the show, some pictures, some images that we have on the computer.
Oh,
And
good.
I'd like you, well, if we could go to those,
Mm-hmm.
Becky, our director, has those
Yes.
on call. So if we could go to one of these, or we'll
Very
go to
good.
a few, and you could tell us what we're looking at now
All right.
in this first image.
Yes, this is called Year of the Woman. In the news at that time, and you're going to ask me when I did it, and I won't remember, chronologically challenged. But in the news, there were sort of two things that didn't go together. One was, and it's still ongoing, talking about equal pay for women and women coming up in the world. And at the same time was an article on bride burning in India. And I thought, how can that be? It was just so, it grated on me. It's made from a half door that comes from our house because we live in an old house and we were doing rehab. And it has like carvings on either side of the Statue of Liberty, representing liberty, but if you look closely, the liberty is very tightly bound. The figure in the middle is taken from an image of an Indian woman. The article was 40 acres and a mule. So I carved it to resemble her, and I actually put her in the fireplace and lit fire to her because I wanted it to really resemble the bride burning in India. So there's a lot going on in there. I could go on, but that's what it represents.
And this is in your studio
Yes, it is.
and would be part of the show.
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to go to the second image.
Yes. Yes. Here's the use of glass and not a window. And this is called Per Beniamino. And Per is spelled P-E-R, and then in parentheses another E, Beniamino. And the P-E-R means for Beniamino. But if you add the E, there's Father Beniamino. When I lived out in Berkeley, California, and I was going to school out there, Benny Bufano was a sculptor that I very much admired, and he did statues like this. He didn't work in glass, but I loved his work, and so this is an homage to him, and I didn't intend to do it. I thought I was going to make a lampshade, started at the bottom, but it just kept on going, and it
So
was...
what are the materials there? Say
It's leaded
arms.
glass. It's all leaded glass.
It's all glass.
Except for the hands and the face, that's brass.
And the crown?
I usually do halo shapes, and that is glass. That center section is a clear base of a huge bottle, all junk, all found
And
junk.
so this is found glass?
Yes, yes.
Did you find that glass? It's all color matched. Was that all one find?
Oh, no,
Or did
over
you,
the
did
years.
you paint it and,
Over the years.
paint it and design it?
It just happened from my collection from the beach.
So you didn't have to take glass and paint it all so that it
Oh,
matched?
No, that's colored glass. Those are like amber bottles from the ocean and aqua-colored glass.
Okay, good. Well, look at a third image here. It's a striking contrast to the last one.
Yes, this is Violet. We've had one dog, and we've had a few cats, usually one at a time, and they become members of the family. And when they die, it's catastrophic. I didn't mean catastrophic in a pun here. I'm very serious. And here, the halo shape is her tail because she had a fabulous tail, and she used to hold it up behind herself to show her joy. So I put the mosaic tail behind her, and I created her in the kiln. I have a kiln.
Wow. One reason we decided not to get another dog is that we didn't want to go through the death again. Although the next dog will probably outlive us. But I'm not going to risk. I'm not going to risk that again.
Isn't it awful? So this is where I deal with emotion in the piece.
And this is a very black cat, I take it.
Yes.
And the contrast here is very, very sharp. There's kind of a bright, optimistic, happy carnival outline around this.
Yes. I like
dense
things to be
darkness.
beautiful. That draws you in. But then if you spend time with it, you can see a lot of what's going on.
And is this, what are the materials here? This is glass?
This is mosaic and clay. I made her out of clay and then glazed her and inserted 2 marbles, antique marbles for eyes.
Very nice. So that cat is returned. In part,
She's always with us, yes.
Okay, now let's look at one more.
Oh, I brought that one, yes. I have it right here. That is called My Mother's Apron Landscape. And what I brought, after my mother died, I kept a lot of the things from her house, and I tried to honor her with several things. I brought 2 pieces. This was
Well, yeah, if you,
a hostess
Right.
apron, one of the ugliest hostess aprons I've ever seen. And I can't imagine her ever really using it. I think it was a gift from my stepfather, her second husband. But I found this apron, and I took it apart, and I thought, what can I do with it? But I don't want it to be too
so
obvious.
these are incorporated in, that, in that image.
Yes,
Okay.
along with some old gloves. The gloves are the trees. There are also a lot of labels. I use labels to indicate things. I like clothing labels, and I like people to give me labels from their clothes.
So that's all cloth.
Yes.
Oh, I like that you have different presentations that are all glass or mosaic or cloth, completely different, different materials.
I brought another cloth thing. This represents something that is a little more whimsical.
Let's see if Connor can get that. Yes, he certainly can.
Yeah.
That's
a fish, but
fish.
what this represents is that when I have a favorite item of clothing, it's in such rough shape that you can't give it to a charity. So I make something out of it, and this was a bathing suit, which is why it became a fish. So I do things like that. I have a few people, I think I have 5 people that are made out of things like jackets or a pair of pants. There's a label.
Does this fish have a name?
No,
Is this
no, it's just
Miss?
the fish. Just
Okay,
the
I'm going to
fish.
put that over here. We can
The
keep it on the
fish.
long shot. I
Yeah.
want to always ask our guests, because we're getting close to the time here.
Yes.
If someone's watching this, an artist who doesn't know what direction to go in, whether art or business or
Yes.
something, what would you advise them? And if they go into art, how would you advise them to choose an avenue?
Something that Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. And I know it's hard because I saw my father struggle. If you try to make a living doing it, chances are you're being directed away from your bliss. I did things using my artistic talent that was not this. that was not these art pieces. I taught art in the public school. I did freelance work. I did illustration. I even painted signs. So,
Not artistic signs, signs that
yeah, but
for
for
sale
business.
or
Yeah,
something.
for business. Yeah. So I made money that way, but this did not involve money.
And that's why you have to keep the purchasers away who want to make.
Until
you have
now, if I can
quilt
have
after
that
quilt after
show,
quilt.
yeah, if I could have that show, after that, things could be priced.
So you would recommend someone to go to study at a university, art?
Find a good art college. I just went wherever my family was. I didn't have that kind of a choice, but I ended up being very fortunate.
Cal State's not a bad degree.
Yeah, yeah.
We are almost out of time. You can see from the clock we're at 1
Yes.
minute. I want to thank you, Stephanie Cole, very much for coming down and presenting all of this really wonderful, various in structure and material and point of view art and explaining it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I also want to thank everybody out in television land, cablecast land, for being with us tonight on the Writer's Block. If you've learned something about multifaceted, multi-material art from Stephanie Cole, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.